Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Greetings and salutation, my friends, my brothers, my sisters. Welcome again to the Richard James Show. We're glad to have you. It's another day. We're going to deal with issues today dealing with Africa. And I have my co-host and my good friend and my buddy, Mr. Leon Diene. Welcome, Lamine. Welcome.
I'm always happy to be here.
That's it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here with such a short notice. But today we're going to deal with a topic that I feel is very, very critical and very, very important. We're going to deal with African migration, particularly to this country. Uh, People don't realize that there have been thousands and thousands of Africans that have left the motherland and entered into the United States seeking a better life and seeking opportunities. And one of the people that I know very well that has done that is my good friend, Diene, who migrated here from the country of Senegal. Uh, Lee, can you kind of give us an overview of your journey? What brought you to the United States? And you've been here, oh my goodness, what 20 years? I'm not sure exactly how long you've been here. Tell us a little bit about your journey coming to the United States of America.
I've been here for over 20 years now.
Okay.
And it's a journey that started when I was young. Actually, it was one of my dreams. When I was in high school, I had an English teacher from the United States. His name is Barry Kingman. And they are from the program that was created by John Kennedy. And in the 60s, that was sending, American citizens to go to Africa to teach or help in different sectors. Agriculture.
Was that the Peace Corps?
Peace Corps, yeah. Peace Corps.
Yes. Okay, very good.
Yeah. So, and then later on, I had another one, when I was at the end of high school. One of the books that we had to read that was in our curriculum was, the Autobiography of Malcolm X. And that's, when we went through that book, it struck me a lot. It touched me. I can exactly remember I was 16 years old. And I started to read everything that has to do with Malcolm X, and freedom fighters,
yes, sir.
and the Black struggle. Everything that I had on my hand, it was a delight for me. So, and then I started to, I said to myself, one day I will go there and be part of the struggle.
Yes, sir.
And I couldn't make it until when I finished high school, went to law school, and then started to work for a law firm. And then at some point, I had to go to Ivory Coast, and then from there, I had the opportunity to come here, and then basically 20 years ago. And then from then on, as you probably know, went through different phases of adaptation and readjustment, and here I am today.
All right. And have accomplished quite a bit. It's just interesting that you noted that you had a teacher that was a part of the Peace Corps. We did a program a month ago on the Peace Corps, as a matter of fact, and
Oh, well,
we had a gentleman by the name who's a very good friend of mine named Alan Olson, who was in Africa in Uganda with the Peace Corps. I'm acquainted with the programs that were put together by JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I and also projected and made to happen by Lyndon Baines Johnson. One of the programs was called Upward Bound, and I created a program called the Chester Tutorial Project years ago, which later evolved into the Upward Bound program. So, what Lamine, there are different pathways, and I've been looking at some videos and reading some things where individuals come to the Americas for different reasons. Uh, uh, some of them is just from war ravaged countries, and they're trying to escape uh, the course of living. Some is poverty, and then it's not always that. Some folks come to continue their education, and they all try to find uh, equal opportunity, and hoping that this democracy that we espouse is a reality and not a myth. So tell me
yeah.
some, tell me something about now. You are I know have been very successful career wise. Uh, Set up a business which you ran for years. Uh, tell us something about that.
Well, actually, one of my first jobs when I came to the U.S. was for an art gallery in New York City,
Oh, okay.
and from then on, I was interested in graphic design. That's what introduced me to the IT career because I went from graphic design to basically handling hardware, dismantling computers and putting them back, fixing them here and there. And then as you probably know, in the IT career, you have to go through certifications, which I did. And at some point, I was offered to be a T-Mobile authorized dealer, and I jumped onto the opportunity, which was a very good business right in the center of Harrisburg, in Strawberry Square.
Yes,
Yeah, so and it was at the time where the one fee fit all didn't start. It was a very lucrative. As soon as you sign in a customer, it was a 2-year contract, and they will pay you a commission that are very substantive at the time. And that's what I did until 2016. And then when business was no good anymore because of the parking system that was sold in downtown Harrisburg.
right.
So I had to move on to go back to my IT career. So basically, that's how it came down. And today, I'm a manual QA engineer, and that's what I've been doing since.
You said you're an engineer now, Lamine?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What are some of the things that you do as an engineer? Uh,
We ba- we basically test applications. Like when you have your phones, there's many applications on your phone and your computer. So we test those applications before they go public.
I
So
see.
before they, release it to the public, it has to go through manual QA engineers who test the application throughout different forms. And if there is a problem, they send it back to the developer. So basically, it goes back and forth from the developer to the manual QA engineer until they think it's right and good to go to the public. Then they publish it. So
Well, you came here, Lamine, with an education, with preparation, uh, and came here from the nation of Senegal, West Africa. Interesting. And as you well know, your good friend Maury Chow, who is my son-in-law, is from the same country of Senegal. But you have other people that have come here with less education, uh, came here uh, getting away from war-ravaged countries, uh, and uh, we find that, and they find. I wonder if they find the same situation that you have in terms of opportunities and be able to move ahead and to get some things done. Okay, we're having a little technical difficulty here for means reception, but
yeah,
any rate,
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
no no
Yeah,
problem.
we back.
What we were saying is that uh, other folks come for different reasons. Another thing I want to lift up is that many of the African leaders have come over here and connected with some of our civil rights media. I heard you said that you had read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Uh, well, there were other leaders that came over here and interacted with Dr. King. One was Kwame Nkrumah. I would say the leader of Pan Africanism and really the leader for the fight for independence for African countries. As a matter of fact, I understand Ghana was one of the first nations to free itself from colonialism. Uh, but we found that some of the atrocities that were committed by these colonialist people made it inevitable that folks would want to leave the continent and then try to find a place where democracy is more than just a notion, more than just a word, but a reality. Overall, you've been able to overcome some obstacles and fight through our system to be able to be here on a legal status. That system, tell us about the process in terms of having to get a visa and that kind of thing, and the length of time it takes to do it. Uh, has anything changed, or is it a more less difficult process than it has been in the past, or is it all things remain the same?
I would say it was easier. Uh, Basically, let's put it this way: it gets strict, stick. It becomes difficult, more difficult, and less easier as the years go by, because the political arena, or the people who are in the political arena, take into account the opinion. And one of the rising opinion throughout the world is nationalism.
Yeah,
And whether it's in America, you go to Europe, in France, just recently, just last week, a politician from the extreme right almost won the election. And you
yeah,
know
I noticed that. Yeah,
yeah, Marine Le Pen. And you go throughout Europe, whether it's France, Germany, etc. uh, the extreme right is basically taking over. And we saw it here in the United States with Donald Trump. And as those kind of opinion rise up, uh, the law readjusts itself. you know. So I would say it was easier than today, and the process is longer also. You know, I there was a time where if even if you are an illegal immigrant, if you are in the United States for 5 years, you can file for uh, residency
Right.
and then spend another 10 years to
Oh my
file for
God.
citizenship, you know. But now it's not the case anymore. Uh, Basically, the pathways to readjust your status is through marriage. That's one of the main venue that you can change your status, and it takes years now between the time you file for your residency and the time you get your citizenship. You know, it depends on the particular situations, but it can go up to 20 years.
I think that's insane. That's
Mhm.
really, really crazy. It's just too long. One thing, uh, uh, they say the more things change, the more things remain the same. One of the negative things that came out of the Trump era was he announced a blockade on Muslims coming to the United States.
Yeah,
Uh, Said he did not want anyone who's Muslim to come in. And that is really, really the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. First of all, there are millions of Muslims already in the United States. Uh, and the United States, even though it's a predominantly Christian nation, there are people, there are Hindus, there are Buddhists, there are people who are of various racial denominations, which add to the majestic uh, uh, integration of these religions into who we are. I think diversity is the most wonderful thing that we have, and people should be not only allowed but encouraged uh, to serve their Creator in the manner that they please. But this was one of the things that came out of the Trump era. You know, he didn't want Muslims here. He didn't want Mexicans coming across the border. Just a ridiculous worldwide effort to lift up this right wing dictatorship which he tried to instigate. But as a result of that, I'll have to give the American people credit because in the election in which Biden came up with a wholly different approach to it, he won by over 7 million votes. That's a lot of votes. That's a
absolutely.
whole lot of votes. And in spite of the gigantic right wing rallies with the right wingers coming together for Trump, the vast majority of the American people rejected that. And we need, if we call ourselves a democracy, we got to love and embrace all people. Democracy means all people. We got to embrace all people and not make it difficult for people to come to this country. We do have a video here that we like to show with an interview with a young lady from Africa, kind of talking about her journey and her perception of what's happening in this country. Uh, let's lift up and take a look at it and see what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
You hear everything about immigration. It's not very easy to come to the States, and especially to come to the States to be a permanent resident here.
Most people have a story to tell.
And that is the beauty of migration.
It's a relatively new phenomenon, but about 1.1 million Black African immigrants are now estimated to be residing in the U.S. and apparently at an uptick. comprising 3% of the U.S. born population, yet hold a majority when it comes to new visas. So why is that, and just what that immigration has looked like over the past few decades is the focus of this Africa in America.
So weather's going to be.
So what is all this here? This is
From college campuses to cobbled streets in metro cities, the American dream has been the draw for immigrants since the beginning of America. We are, after all, the nation of immigrants. But as one of the fastest growing migrant groups, Africans not only the focus of international headlines as of late, in many cases are also very widely misunderstood. The media certainly does not help with those misperceptions in many ways, because they show one view many times of Africa, and that is poor, desolate, humanitarian case, health, disease. And whilst those issues persist in certain areas, that's not what many experience on day to day in many of these countries. And is that right? I mean, talk a little bit about that misperception.
Correct. I think the issue of misperception is absolutely one that I think is of concern to a lot of us who are here. Because as you said, I think rightfully, a lot of what is being portrayed is all of what is not good. It's diseases, it's poverty, it's corruption, it's political, instability and all of that. And the stories that are often not told are really the stories of rejuvenation. There's not those stories that are told. There's not the story of vibrancy and the fact that, one of the fastest growing areas when it comes economically, happen to be in Africa, in terms of some of the countries in Africa that are experiencing tremendous growth. That story is not being told. People who immigrate never really cut themselves off from their home base, is what I often say. And in many ways, we have one foot here, one foot there. And so in that instance, I think a lot of us stay connected to our parts of the world in many ways. And I think also our governments have begun to realize the value that brings.
So would you consider yourself an African or an American?
I would say I'm an African living in America. I'm African first, and living in America, I'm American second.
A better path to that understanding starts at the beginning by examining just who Africans, not to be confused with Black Americans, are and how they come to arrive in America, yet still very culturally connected to their communities.
For me, I've been here, 12 years. That's a really good fraction of my time. So this is my country.
Right. This is home to you.
This is home to me. But I really think there's a lot of value in people who are doing things and succeeding here in a global economy where it really helps to know about or to have exposure. African immigrants or immigrants of all countries are giving exposure to their countries in a place that is very powerful, very wealthy, etc. Also, there are a lot of threads between people who live here and back home that connect us, so that people are sending money, whether it's going on. I used to go teach at some university.
Demographically speaking, most of America's African immigrant population hail from 12 of the 50-plus countries that make up the continent. Nigerians, President Obama's paternal makeup, are the largest segment. Egyptians come in second. Ethiopians rank fourth. South Africans, including people like actress Charlize Theron, are sixth. And Kenyans, like Lupita Nyong'o, rounding out the 10th.
And these are some of her friends in Khartoum.
And then there are these not so commonly known stories that reflect just some of the diversity among Africans and Americans with African lineage throughout the diaspora.
right.
Not a lot of people know the story about you. Your mom is Sudanese.
My mother was born in Khartoum, Sudan. My mom grew up in Khartoum, Sudan, and didn't live anywhere else until she moved to the United States. Met my father, who was in the army in Ethiopia, in Asmara. And met in the late 60s, got married in Africa, and then moved from there, growing up their entire life, to Queens, New York. So you want to talk about a clash of
Cultures, right.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a little, if at all, known fact about one of the nation's top leaders in American politics, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus. Where does Reince Priebus come from? What is that?
Well, I tell people it's what happens when a Greek and a German get married.
Despite the name, his Greek and African heritage has helped shape Priebus's ideals and reflect the core principles of immigration and African migration in particular.
It was a really from what I hear, it was a really neat time in Africa when much of Europe and a lot of exploration and business was booming at that time, and it was a great time to be there. So my grandfather had a brother who started a business in Khartoum. And my grandfather moved to Khartoum to help his brother, like when he was 16 or 17.
Your parents were immigrants, and you became the chairman of the Republican National Committee. I mean, there's a message of really hope and opportunity through that too, right? And
Well, that's right. I mean, and growing up and just watching my grandfather, I mean, I used to tell this story. He was very much into politics. And in Greece, as you may know, there's only a few parties. And at the time when I grew up, there was the Socialist Party, which was called the PASOK. There was the KKE, which was the Communist Party. And then there was another party called the New Democracy Party. My grandfather was very much into the New Democracy Party. He loved America. Everything about it he loved. I mean, that's what I remember. And the thing I took from it is that anything and everything about this country, every crumb and morsel, he loved.
Yeah.
And it spoke to me because here I was, an American in America, and the person that I looked up to the most loved everything about where he was not.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, shaped me in my appreciation for this great country.
So the Africans, many times will tell you, I'm American.
This is the land of opportunity. I think everyone believes that this is the land of opportunity.
Today, there are about 1.1 million black African immigrants to the U.S., among the largest group of immigrants to the United States, having grown 200% in the 80s and 90s, over 100% in the 2000s. They reside in major metropolitan areas, particularly like here in the district.
I think as sociologists, we often say social networks are everything when it comes to migration, because a lot of times, we're asked the question, why is it that people migrate to the places that they migrate to? And there are many factors, but really a lot of the time, the preponderant factor has to do with who else is there. I often say if one community comes, then word goes back, to sort of that place where migration started, to kind of let people know how things are going here. And then in many ways, once the word spread, then you start to see sort of a pattern. So it's not an accident that, for example, many of the Ethiopians have immigrated to a place like Washington, D.C., or that we have a pretty vibrant community, of Nigerians that are in places like Atlanta, or that we have a large Somali community in places like, Minnesota, et cetera. Those are also networks in Texas, right?
I've just learned.
Absolutely. That is because when one group settles in, message goes back to say this is a good place to come to. You have a community to come to, and in addition, that community really serves as an anchor on so many fronts, in that they provide really more support, but also they provide in many cases economic support, and they often help you transition to jobs, and that is a major reason.
The diaspora is growing. According to the Migration Policy Institute, instability in some African countries has been a chief motivating factor. But over the past 3 decades, the majority of black African immigrants, about 2/3, have legally entered the United States through family provisions. About a quarter are refugees or those who gain asylum. Another quarter are legal permanent residents with one of 3 types of visas. More on that a little later. And about 2% are temporary immigrants who enter with work or student visas. For immigrants like Professor Fanta Aw, her journey started nearly 20 years ago.
I would say, given my background as someone who is an African here, living in America, I think like many of us in this country, we've come, we have different means. Some of us have come as refugees, others have come as students, and then from students have remained here. And then in other cases, some have come to work.
Now a sociologist at Washington, D.C.'s American University, also studies migration patterns as a professional lecturer in the international school.
I would say I would be someone who would be called a global nomad, in the sense that I was raised outside of my home country because of my parents' occupation. I'm originally from Mali, West Africa. I was born in Mali, and at the age of 7, with my family, we moved to Liberia because my father at the time was working for the UN. And then from Liberia, we came to the United States because he started to work for the World Bank. And so I came here at the age of 12, and I was at the French International School.
Very
And
prestigious.
it was a very good experience. Really enjoyed the experience. And then from the French International School, we moved to Nairobi while he was still working for the World Bank, and actually graduated from the French International School in Nairobi. And then after that, came back to the U.S. This time as a student, because I had been exposed to the U.S. as a young child. I became very interested in the educational system, and after having gone through the French educational system from K through 13, felt that this perhaps would have been a better fit. So I came back for my bachelor's degree and actually ended up at American University here in Washington, D.C. And my undergraduate degree was in accounting and in business. And it was with the goal of, after completing my degree, was to go back to Africa and to see how I could contribute to development within the continent. And so I did do that. When I completed my degree, I went back and I worked, and I was actually working in Senegal, and I was working in accounting as an auditor. The transition was hard.
You
Having,
missed it.
I did miss it. I absolutely missed it, and decided to come back to pursue my graduate degree. My graduate degree was back here at American University.
An irony not lost, given that All also uses her experiences and position to now help international students transition to American culture. And she places great value on the richness of American culture because of African influence. While Africans comprise 10% of all legal admissions into the United States, they account for 48% of what are considered diversity visa immigrants.
The diversity visa came about because the U.S. sort of government and Congress realized that with migration patterns that there was not the level of diversity that they could have. Particularly that some of the places that were really in many ways absent from migration were places like Africa, and also some other parts of the world. And so they came up with the diversity lottery as really a way to diversify the migration that was going on. And I would say certainly since the diversity lottery became so, it has benefited tremendously in terms of Africa. It has benefited African immigrants tremendously.
Austin is a place.
Since 2010, almost half of Africans, like Ethiopian transplant and Alexandria, Virginia resident Azarius Rita, are more likely to be admitted to the U.S. through the diversity visa.
So DV lottery is something that you just apply to. You basically go to, so the U.S. State Department runs this thing, and annually about like 50,000 people from around the world or families from around the world are selected just by the rough luck to come to the States, to immigrate to the States. And as luck would have it, my family filled that out and we got it.
Very lucky, considering his field of practice was non-existent in his homeland. He's a tech sector entrepreneur and LinkedIn alum with a PhD who parlayed his love for computer science with an American education into a lucrative business and political career, and at age 29 is just getting started.
I'm really excited about where IT, computer science, the internet is going, especially as it applies to economies. If you look at the pattern, like China and India, that you see that a lot of outsourcing has happened over the years, where it's just as easy to, especially for the kind of work that we do, especially if it is divided up so well, it's just as easy to have it done in Ethiopia or in India as it is here, except you have one advantage, which is you can get it done for cheaper because the cost of life is much cheaper in Ethiopia than it is here. So you have a lot of smart people who can get connected, who can get online, who can do things, who can produce value, and without the barrier of the physical barrier, you have to be productive and get paid for it. So one of the things I really want to work on, I continue to work on, is how can we have this platform where the African continent, basically, and this is happening in Kenya, it's happening in Nigeria, it's happening in South Africa, where you have developers, you have IT professionals that are working from Africa, working with companies international, not only in the States but in Europe, etc., and are making American wages essentially, or something like close to that, which is going to change a lot of people's lives. Every time you touch one person, in Ethiopia, people live very closely. Like the family is not just a core family; it's an extended family. So you touch a lot of people through that. So I think there is a lot of opportunities that go on. I don't know if that book, "The World Is Flat" by Thomas Friedman, kind of spells this out, where he was talking about India mostly and China, But I think that's going to start to happen. It already has started happening in Africa. And I think that's the hope that I have.
Rada also represents another likely little-known fact about Africans. They're among the most educated immigrant population, which is another part of that compelling migratory factor.
I was very surprised. So I read this stat that say when you break down communities in the United States and you look at the most educated subgroup within the United States, more than any other category, it's not Caucasians, it's not Asian Americans, it's African immigrants
yes.
in the United States. It was very surprising, and I think it really has to do with one, like you come and get opportunity that you have never got before. So it's just like you're a kid in a candy shop, and you can't help but do that. And then it really has to do with the background where you can't. Maybe you can do business, maybe you can go into athletics perhaps, but the most common way for people back in Ethiopia to be successful, and a lot of the role models you have currently happen to be people who went to school and who have achieved academically and can use that in many places. So really that's considered to be the main mechanism that is fair to everybody, that you can make yourself however you define success.
When you look at this kind of dichotomy between the young black youth here and the young black immigrants that come here, talk about that dynamic. I mean, there's a little bit of adversary relationship going on with regard to the stereotypes and misnomers around that, right?
One of the things that we know from studies of migration is that those who immigrate in many ways want to make sure that the next generation is better off. And part of making sure that the next generation is better off is your willingness to make sacrifices, right? And in making sacrifices is ensuring that the next generation has access to what will lead to social mobility. And in many cases, there's the understanding that what fundamentally can lead to social mobility is education. And so African families, I think like many families, will invest in education and will make sure that education becomes front and center of sort of the lives of their children in more ways than you can imagine. I think also in the case of Africans in particular, because of of history of race relations in this country, I think they take that even more seriously. So it's often interesting that we talk about Asian Americans, and we talk about the model minority myth when it comes to Asian Americans and how Asian Americans are very vested in education. Often not told is the story of how Africans in particular are very vested in in education. And in many ways even more so because they often recognize that the social mobility will come from a combination of education and your ability to really excel in more ways if you're going to have those doors open.
A touchy subject sometimes with Black Americans, but an important cultural link and part of a legacy she insists must be reclaimed.
And I would say, yes, I think there certainly could be more emphasis. And I think what is unfortunate is that if you do look at really the history of the African American community, education was very important. Very, very important. You just need to look at some of the HBCUs that have educated generations of intellectuals in this country, and business people and lawyers and so forth. And so that has been part of the history. And over a period of time, it's eroded for all the different social reasons that we've seen. Some of it has been, I think, like many other groups, is this sort of quick fix idea that you're better off basically not maybe going to school and in many ways becoming rich by playing basketball, by being a movie star, by being sort of the biggest rap singer you can be, as opposed to understanding that education still is a major investment and probably one of the best investment you can make.
It's shifted more on the right now than the investment.
Than the investment part. Yeah. I think it's really sort of this idea of sort of the immediacy piece. And yet I think what's forgotten is that education has been very central to African American traditions. Very, very much so. And so I'm often, as a sociologist, am very saddened when sometimes I'm in urban schools or urban areas and I hear young Black youth in many ways sort of see education as wanting to be white. When I often say, well, that is not your history. That is not your history. As a nation that has had involuntary migration and seeing how far African Americans have come and the level of resilience, education has been very much a central part of that story, in addition to really hard work and making sure that you prepare the next generation.
So your brothers and sisters?
I do. They're very tiny. Something that I really wish people did here, both African Americans, but Americans at large, is travel abroad. Travel to Africa, travel to Ethiopia, travel
Yes.
to where you get to see how people live, and you have a whole new appreciation for the things that you have here, for the opportunities that are readily available for you to take advantage of. And I'm not saying people don't already know that, but you get a whole new context when you travel and see how different people live in. It's a special place that this is, and the opportunity that it affords. And I think that's sort of what approximates how people feel when they immigrate to this country.
You are, someone might say to you, like this is uncommon for what they would see as a black male to be in computer science or to be running a tech company.
Yeah.
How did you, and not only that, but you've successfully run a business or two. How did you go from pursuing that education, then graduating, going on to grad school, to making that into career success? What were your next steps? Did you visualize yourself that way?
Yeah, for me, it really came down. It's about the time I was finishing up grad school. I really had to think about that. Like, what do I want to do next? So, like, you finish your PhD and you either become an academician or you do something else. And I actually went through the route and applied to a bunch of schools and got a couple offers to be, a tenured professor and do research and continue, which is a pretty safe job to have, but you think about you come from a different world, and really at this point what you want to do is what's the biggest thing that I can do? Like, how can I maximize the opportunity that I was given? Just make a big splash. And again, how you define success is different. How can I be even more successful? So for me, like, you look at people, you look at role models, you look at folks like Bill Gates, and you see that they are successful because they were able to create businesses that were scalable, and that's where technology is. Computer science is a little different than perhaps some other kind of businesses where you can do things that can easily scale and touch a lot of people's lives. So I felt like I was in a position where I had studied computer science, I have a set of experiences and skill sets that I had gained that could be used into doing things that can turn big, and that's a process that takes a long time, but I mean, I wanted to try, and that's why. So I turned down an offer to be a professor, and I started my first company right after that. Just because you're given opportunities, you want to see how far it goes. It also has to do, like, if you look at Silicon Valley, I think at this point has actually gotten to be the majority of people who start businesses are immigrants, and I think the reason for that is what you consider to be risky is completely different. What we consider to be risky and what an American might consider to be risky is very different. So it's perfectly okay to study English literature and drive a cab in Washington D.C. Or in New York for America. So you follow what you want to do because you're not worried about the standard of. I mean, again, I'm generalizing. It's not probably correct at large, but for most people, the standard of life is that you can't go any lower than a certain amount, and you're free to do whatever you want. Sure. If you look at the immigrant community, which comes from even more difficult places, really, you look at this and say, I have to focus on what can propel me, as far as I can. That's why there's a big focus on STEM. So you have science, the hard sciences, engineering, mathematics. You have a lot of doctors. You have a lot of lawyers go after these opportunities because this is the one thing that you have versus when you have a lot of things that you can try as an American, for example.
As for that idyllic picture where dreams are fueled by unlimited opportunity and a bag packed with desire.
This is when Yaya worked at the embassy.
Did you ever see those before, Jay?
No.
Have you seen those pictures?
No.
What do you think?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My parents always talked glowingly of Africa. My father used to tell me that there was no more beautiful place outside of the United States than Asmara. I'm like, well, my mom was, it was in Newton, New Jersey that she was sworn in as an American citizen, and she had to take, go into classes, and I was very young at the time, but my mother now tells me these stories. And apparently I was there when she became a U.S. citizen. I think it's important to sort of just be able to move into different cultures and not be as thrown off by things that are different. You know, everyone, a lot of people, most people have a story to tell, which is something that we forget about in America. That most people have a story to tell.
There are stories that inspire with each generation.
Like, so there's more absolutely than people.
And for all, the future of African migration looks bright.
I think we can expect to see that migration continue to grow. I think the reason why we can expect to see that migration continue to grow is also because of the growth in population in Africa. Africa continues to be one of those continents where there's tremendous growth in population. And as I said, also because of the growth in youth and the youth bulge, the youth will be looking to where their future might be. And if their future is in Africa, as the economic situation changes, as the political situation changes, then I think they will stay. But if that is not where things go, then they will be seeking new destinations. And those new destinations can be in Europe. But I think more and more, there is a very strong desire to come to the United States.
All right. All right. Lamine, what is your take on this video?
Well, throughout the interviews, we got a chance to follow. You can see that there's many and different experiences that push people to come to the United States.
Yes.
And then we can say that people come here for different reasons.
Right.
And we saw that when it comes to Africa, the rise of African immigrant to the United States started when decolonization took place. That's when people start to see beyond their own living place to seek opportunity in the United States. Some have moved here through family reunion. Some moved for because they were living in a place where there was war, poverty, extra. But if you take it in all, we can say that the African immigrants in the United States are taking advantage of the opportunities that was presented to them by the United States. You can see the lives of all these people who have been interviewed. We can say that the majority of African immigrants are doing well in the United States. Really.
I totally agree with that. That is absolutely true. And I've befriended many of my brothers and sisters from the motherland. Uh, and I find most of them are well educated. Most of them are positive in what they're doing. And some of the real serious social problems that African Americans face and other Americans face, I find that they appreciate the opportunities more than some of us do, and take advantage of those opportunities. I was listening to that young man, and he kind of reminded me of you. Uh, he, he's an engineer. He's dealing in the technical field. He's set up a business. I said, "Oh, is that talking about Lamine?" Because that seems like your journey has been quite similar to that, and you've done quite well in terms of your career in the technical field. And some people don't. When they think of Africa, they still try to get past those stereotypes. Uh, Jungles, lions, snakes. I mean, they can't conceptualize a whole continent. And some people even think, for example, if there's anything pure or risk-cat, it couldn't be in Africa. I had a young woman that came to my stand, a white woman, who argued me down that Egypt was not in Africa. I mean, so, oh no, it's got to be in Europe. There's no way something that important and significant in history could come from Africa. And as reality sets, and one of the things the young lady said is that people, and the young man said, is that people should explore uh, the continent, should go to the continent, and we're hoping, my wife and I, the plan. She's already been to Africa, but I want to go and spend some time. She participated in a program called Crossroads Africa back in the '60s, and have other friends that have done that to really find out what's going on. But I found out, quite frankly, a lot about Africa by intermingling and befriending my African family that's here. But I like the interview. Now, there's some things that have happened on a negative side.
That's right.
We've had certain presidents and certain leaders in our country that have been responsible for some of the colonialism that existed. We've had leaders such as Patrice Lumumba, who now the CIA openly admits that they were part of his demise. Um, it's quite questionable. And Nkrumah, who was the uh, one of the premier leaders of the whole Pan African situation, was overthrown uh, at home in Ghana. Uh, and he was really, really our patriot. He was our George Washington. Uh, Guam and Nkrumah taught African socialism and raise up our people. So we have got to push on this end to be positive because we are citizens. One thing I love about America is that each one of us have a vote. Each one of us does have the ability, and some of the old institutions are gone. Some of the old racist institutions are no longer with us, and we're here, and we can do what we can. I noticed one thing in the and Barack Obama. I was highly involved in Barack Obama's campaign, and there were many Africans, who were here, who had gotten their citizens, who were legal residents, that supported and went out and campaigned for Barack Obama, and he won overwhelmingly. But I think that once we learn as African Americans to love and respect ourselves, there's no way we can love and respect ourselves and not love and respect Africans because we are indeed the same. That's at least that's my perception.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely right. And going back to the African immigrants, you know, most of them, when they do well, it's good for the United States too. And then
Absolutely.
you can see with this young man who's just when he had his PhD, instead of going to the easy way by teaching in the university and being a researcher, he preferred to invest in himself where his knowledge can have a larger impact, and then take the risk to create a business. Who knows what business can take him to? It
Right.
could be a Facebook or a YouTube. I mean, it could be the size of a Google, because if you can see his vision is very important. Create a company where African talents can work from Africa for the United States. It's a huge, huge vision for me. It's a very important. And as he said, if you touch one person, you touch his extended family back home, but you profit from his talent. And what moved America ahead when it comes to economy is talent, because America have been able to gather all the talents coming from all over the world to push his industry. And I believe, and this is one of thousands and thousands of examples that we can give, and that profit not only the immigrant but profit America,
and indeed, and profit the world. Uh,
profit the world. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's no way you can lift up and be successful here. And one thing the young lady has stated is that Africans tend to take care of their home. Most of my friends have parents or sisters or brothers or somewhere in Africa, and they help to share, share what they have gained, which I think is excellent. Uh,
Mhm.
I think it's really important. We got 54 nations on the continent of Africa. One thing we got to do is to educate people in terms of the reality that Africa is not all monolithic. You have different nations, you have different cultures, you have different people. And we had a video on several weeks ago that talked about the rising economy in some countries. Countries like Nigeria, for example, that is the leading economy in Africa, and South Africa is the second leading economy in Africa. But Africans are on the rise. They're becoming stronger. They're becoming more knowledgeable and more influential. There was a situation in the Ukraine where a group of Africans who were studying in the Ukraine were trying to leave the country because of the war, and uh, and some of the Ukrainians that blocked them from leaving, and they wanted to put the whites first,
Yeah.
and force the students uh, to wait. Well, the African nations, African leaders stepped forward and they went to the UN and they protested it. We're one people. We're not going to stand for that kind of garbage and that kind of racism. I don't care who it comes from. I don't like the fact that Russia invaded the Ukraine, but I don't like the fact that Ukraine uh, are racist and treat our people as if they're different. That really
Absolutely.
annoyed me.
Absolutely. And the advantage of all these technologies is to it exposes everything that goes on, and everybody knows the next minute what's going on. And the situation of African students in the Ukraine was the example of it. But in the meantime, what you said earlier for African American, they are being more and more exposed to the real situation in Africa.
Yeah.
They don't listen to the you know the paradigm that is proposed by the mass media about Africa.
Yes.
Now they have a tendency to go see themselves in the continent on the ground, and they see that most of it was lies,
Yes.
and all of them are on YouTube. You can see thousands of African Americans who are over there on the ground and doing business, participating,
Yes.
being. And if you listen to most of them, they say we are here to take our rightful place. And this is a narrative that I like. I
Yes.
definitely love that because the mass media narrative doesn't operate anymore.
No. No. That's absolutely true. Uh, as some of my folks know, that I have a African business that I call African Paradise, and I'm able to, through fair trade, uh, get things that are made and created in Africa and to sell them in this country. But also just by having the art on display, people really began to learn more about the creative genius that come out of Africa. And I just sit down and sometimes and just stare at some of the statues that I have, uh, the clothing and the tremendous artwork. And we know when we read and go back to knowing about African history and the great civilizations that really were the foundation of world history. these nations, Shanghai, Mali, some of the great Nubia, some of the great civilizations that existed in terms of art and culture and religion and some of the lies and miseducation. Because when you lie to one people and tell them they're nothing, you're lying to everybody, and you affect all people. Because Black Lives Matter, yes, it do. All lives matter, yes, it does. And so when you lie and you try to demean any people, then you rob everybody of the knowledge and information that they need to move forward. Uh, I mean, I think about all of my friends uh, African descent. I speak one language, and that's English. And I can't think 90% of that. My African friends speak two or three languages, like yourself. I, I know you speak several languages. I mean, not only that, but just have technical skills. And I'm just happy to have Lamine as a friend. But when I have a technical problem when it comes to computer, I say help, help, and he does it. Brilliant, brilliant individual, brilliant people. We're getting right down to nearly the end of our show. Anything you want to say in closing, Lamine, the broadcast?
Well, this I believe this would be one part of the whole African immigrant history, because there's a lot of things to cover.
Yes.
This video doesn't cover everything.
Right.
Uh, as you said, there is a ugly side of immigration too, and you talked about it off Mike, and there's another side of the story. Maybe if you want, we can later on talk about it.
I think that's important. You're absolutely right. There are folks that have been forced to take routes through South America and other areas to get into this country, and they face death, starvation. They face a lot of problems. So we need to talk about that. We got immigrants that come by way of sea who have drowned in boats. But we need to talk about the whole situation of migration, and we need to encourage our administration in this country to continue to be support of people who immigrants and people throughout the world. Uh, well, hey, it's been another good day. Uh, it's always good to see and hear from you. But we want you to tune in again next week, uh, and also uh, 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 come to see us. Take care now. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Hello. Yes. Yes. 30. Okay. let me. Oh my God. Now, African American 5. Set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.
You're listening to The Voice 17104.